MPs in Australia have voted to urge the return home of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. The Australian whistleblower has spent 5 years imprisoned in Britain, battling to stop extradition to the US. Assange is wanted there to face espionage charges over WikiLeaks' publication of classified documents. High Court judges in London are due to issue a ruling next week on whether Assange will lose his appeal against extradition.
It will send a very powerful political signal to the British government and to the US government that the British government should not entertain the idea of Mr Assange being extradited to the US. It sends a very powerful signal to Washington that Australia stands as one, saying that this matter has gone on long enough, that regardless of what you might think of Mr Assange, justice is not being served in this case now.
Well, Geoffrey Robertson is a human rights barrister and former legal advisor to Julian Assange. He joins us from Melbourne, Australia. Good to have you with us. So, are you hopeful at all that this call by the Australian Parliament will have any impact on Julian Assange's fate?
Oh, will it have any effect on the Pentagon that wants to kill him? No, I think that this is a motion by the governing party as a wake-up call to its greatest ally. America has no greater ally than Australia. And now the Australians are saying this has gone on too long. This man has been in an embassy for 9 years, and then in a prison for 5 years. That's 14 years. And what has he done? He's published details that were available to 3 million servicemen and officials about American policy and about war crimes that America committed. And this is what he's got for it. So I think he's suffered enough. That's the view of Australians. It's the British judges have been hopelessly delayed. There's been no explanation of why it has taken so long in Britain. I think it will take longer still because after the two British judges announce their decision next week, he's got the possibility of an appeal to the Supreme Court. And if he doesn't have that, he can go to the European Court of Human Rights and ask for an interim order to stop him being sent to America, which has the prospect that he'll commit suicide in accordance with the decision of the first judge. And of course, that's an interim order of a kind that was very controversial when it was made to stop the flight to Rwanda, but maybe less controversial in this case. But it is a case where I'm sure many of those who are advising President Biden wish that an accommodation could be reached with their great ally, Australia, but where the Pentagon, which is really led by unreconstructed Cold War warriors, insists that Assange must be punished to deter other whistleblowers. So I think there is some question about conflict within the American administration. But this has been solved before. There was an Australian called David Hicks, who was the only white man left in Guantanamo. And they did a deal. The Australian government was able to get him to plead to a lesser charge so that he could be released. So that is one. Well,
okay, that's a good point. What is the likelihood that maybe some kind of deal a la Hicks could be worked out, given the fact that, I mean, this whole battle over extradition started with rape allegations in Sweden. Those allegations, that's what provoked the whole extradition request and legal battle. That investigation was dropped in 2019. He spent 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy. He spent 5 years in London on an extradition case pending there. I mean, what is the likelihood now of extradition versus some kind of Hicks-style deal, if we could call it that?
Well, it's always a question for the individual, and frankly, every individual, no matter what their principles, and Assange is a very principled person, would be tempted to get out of a prison that has got violent offenders, which is full of COVID and so forth, to get out of a prison and get back with his 2 children, his loyal wife, and so forth. In Australia, that would be something that I think would be so tempting that he may well agree to even pleading guilty to something that he's not guilty of, and everyone would understand it, in order to satisfy the rather brutal American who are so hypocritical because they claim to be the home of free speech, and yet speech is very expensive for this man. They're not prosecuting the New York Times, they dare not, which published, of course, much of his work. But it's a problem that they will have to deal with, and it may be that all sides will be satisfied if he pleads guilty to a minor offence and can be released or sent home.
All right, thank you so much for your time and analysis. Geoffrey Robertson there.